Friends, can everybody hear me? Thank you so much for bearing with us while we got ourselves together for this next session. We are all present and correct. I hope you are. It's been a very interesting morning so far with a lot of intense thinking going on. And I'm delighted to be introducing this next session. My name is Olivia Marks-Woldman. I'm the Chief Executive of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and I'm thrilled to be part of this event with such an esteemed panel. I want to start by thanking AJR, Michal, Mike, and all your colleagues and the supporters who've developed this conference. It's a fantastic initiative, and I'm delighted so many of us are here engaging with these really interesting questions that many of us wrestle with through the year, and to come together with colleagues who are wrestling with the similar questions and responsibilities. It's a real privilege for us all. This panel will be the second part of the session looking at curating Holocaust testimonies in the digital age, testimonies in spaces of learning. And our panel today comprises Marc, the director of the National Holocaust Museum and Centre in Newark, Angela Shapiro, founder member of Gathering the Voices in Scotland and a senior lecturer and now fellow of Glasgow Caledonian University, Alessandro Bucci, the director of the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association, now the Holocaust Centre North in Huddersfield. So some really interesting spread across the UK here. And Michal Chojak from Yahad in UNUM, researcher with them, an organisation founded by someone many of you will have heard of, the French Catholic priest Father Desbois. We're going to crack on. We're under pressure of time, so everybody focus for some very interesting sessions. Marc, I'll hand over to you first.
Is it coming up on the screen, guys? Yes, it is. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I promise to be good, but I don't always keep my promises. I'm very worried, and we at the National Holocaust Museum are very worried. We don't think enough questions are asked of ourselves about why we use testimony. For us, I'm going to try and answer how we use it. And I'm going to start by showing you a clip from a film that we use to explain to teachers what the Forever Project in particular is for, which is our interactive testimony, inverted commas.
The Forever Project uses AI technology to enable young people to meet, interact, and share incredible moments with Holocaust survivors, not just today, but forever.
Such a powerful thing to hear.
It's groundbreaking, can teach you a lot about humanity.
So it's the point at the end about humanity. It's about thinking about our survivors as human beings and what that means, and specifically what do we want our human beings today to learn. So when I look, for example, at this incredible, beautiful, wonderful Susan Pollack, she's not just a survivor. You know, look at that face. Look what's going on in her eyes, the history, the present, the future. I'm interested to know about not just her Holocaust experience, I'm interested to know how she copes with having gone through that, but then having lost a daughter to cancer 10 years ago. I'm fascinated at the age of 92 or 93 why she wants to learn to daven, to pray faster, which we're working with her on. It's the whole human being, and it's the fascinating thing. When I look at Martin, I didn't realize he was here today, Martin Stern. You know, I want a 360 view of what Martin is about. He's such a deep thinking man. He's so fascinated in behavioral science and the science of change, and particularly how Holocaust education can change people. This is goes way beyond conventional testimony. Fortunately, these two blokes who founded our museum, James and Stephen, thought the same way, intuitively. So their relationship with this community of survivors has enabled us to be able to take a 360 view. So the sense of the connection of the survivors' stories to a sense of place is for us a real distinguishing factor, I suppose. And, them with their family, with Marina and Eddie, over 30 years have built such extraordinary relationships that it'd be crazy, in a sense, not to include that in some way in the testimony. So, they built somewhere physical, somewhere tangible, but somewhere beautiful, what I suppose today we'd call a safe space. I hate that phrase, I don't know why I used it, but certainly a beautiful place that allows you to think, talk, really relax into the subject matter. It's a family, this is a family business, it's an extended family, and it has been for many, many years. And it's a two-way thing as a family, it's warts and all, and it started with a very spiky relationship. Kitty Hart-Moxon was hugely cynical about this venture. It's not going to get off the ground, you're kidding. So I just want to play you this little thing about her talking about it.
Over a 4-year period, the project came into being.
There was this car outside and out jumped some young chap that I'd never seen. He said, well, you're one of the survivors, aren't you? And I've come to see you because I am going to open a Holocaust centre. And my husband was there and we both laughed. We looked at one another and laughed. And I said, well, that's a very noble idea, Stephen, but you're not going to make it. Lots and lots of people have tried and failed. And I've been to hundreds of meetings and nothing's happened. He said, you wait. When the centre opened, I was gobsmacked. I really was, It was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. It was just an amazing sight.
So as much as we love and adore our family of survivors, I hope and I think it's fair to say that the survivors feel rather similarly about the Smiths, and no wonder in my view. So you brought that down, in a formal sense, is a very strong sense in place. So, you have the wonderful Eric Hirsch coming doing the formal stuff. He'll be lighting the remembrance candles, he'll be giving his formal testimony. But the fact that he and the Smiths have lived their lives together, sharing each other's celebrations and sadnesses and mundanities for, 3 decades, is a powerful thing. The Smiths would build a sukkah every year, and Eric and Jean will be in that sukkah. Eric donates all of the proceeds of his book to us, every penny, always has, and is prepared to fundraise and doesn't mind who goes and asks for money on our behalf. It's why Eva Schloss, the wonderful Eva, says, of all the Holocaust museums I've ever visited around the world, Bet Shalom, our nickname, is the only one I've ever left feeling uplifted. It's why the absolutely adorable, irrepressible Janine, talks about the place as her second home. And hopefully that love, I think it genuinely is love that they have for the Smiths, and it's reciprocated. I hope we today are trying to, do a bit of that ourselves. So it looks like sometimes we succeed. I never wash that cheek, by the way. So if I give you now, getting slightly closer to the subject matter, take Stephen Frank, Westerwalk and Teresa Chat survivor. So that's Stephen about 6 months ago in our coffee shop. And that's with Leonie, who runs the coffee shop. It's the same love, But when you put that side by side with, the stuff we have in the collection, Stephen as a little boy in Amsterdam, Stephen on his sledge in Amsterdam, the sledge now in our collection today, Stephen at Marina's 80th, I think that was, Stephen with the first Smith grandchild, Stephen, very oddly, with his brother wearing school uniform, I'm not quite sure why, in the Memorial Gardens. Stephen with a donor and with Sarah Wetton, one of our educators, having a good old chat in the gardens. Stephen seeing Marina, I think, was the last time. And just look at the intensity in Marina's face if you can see it. There's a real... Actually, I find that very poignant. And this is Stephen's granddaughter, lighting a memorial candle at the last remembrance service that we held. All of that is what we try and bottle in the Forever Project. It's a delistation of the sense of the whole human being and the place, the whole enchilada. So, yes, of course, it's about the Holocaust, but it's about them as a human being before it and very, very, very much after it. And to encourage in conversation questions that really tease out what the whole human being is like, for good and for bad. I'm not sure any of them ever become axe murderers, I'd rather hope not, but you take the point. Thinking about the human being in their career, in their personal lives, as a child, as a parent, as a Jew, as a Christian. I mean, John Fields, one of the family, actually went on to become an Anglican. You know, it's fascinating. Why do we ignore all that stuff? Why do we just focus testimony on 33 or whatever, 38 to 45? For us, they are very much the founding pillars of a community, and that's what we try to encourage. So when we use testimony, inverted commas, it's really more of a conversation amongst people who come again. I think, as a former advertising guy, I would say you're never going to change anyone's mind about anything if you talk to them once. You have to have a relationship, particularly with our subject matter. You know, if someone's in denial or wants to distort, you're not going to persuade them with a rational one-off piece of messaging. So this sense of community, intergeneration, community, really important to us. It's always been the case. This is the lovely late Bernard Grunberg, you know, in the Journey exhibition, with an educator, with the kids. It's a conversation. I'll never ever forget Rudy. You know, he would insist on taking kids outside of the memorial hall, into the gardens, to have a chat. That is what we're trying to replicate. Why, you might ask? Well, I think for us, there's hard and soft reasons. The first is that, as you'll have kind of gleaned, we don't really regard testimony as testimony. It's a conversation. The act of involving somebody in the conversation, we know from research in other fields, is 22% more effective than just lecturing at somebody, waving a finger, or just, you know, one-way monologue like this. And that's derived from some really quite powerful research, and it's all the more effective with underprivileged areas. And we do a lot of work. We're interested in the Eatons and the Harrows, but we're much more interested in the St Anne's Primary in Rotherham. So involving kids in a conversation with the survivor is magic stuff. And I think from an attitude and a behaviour change point of view, which at the end of the day is for us what it's about, we are not going to make any factual information stick. We all know the UCL research from a few years ago that, you know, shows alarmingly low levels of knowledge about the facts of the Holocaust. That's because, I would argue, we haven't engaged the audience enough. Emotion is the basis of every human decision. Sentiment moves stock markets. Emotion sells. If we don't coat the facts with emotion, we might as well pack up and go home. So in a sense, and I don't want to diminish the gravitas of testimony, but it's almost like creating a sense of empathy so that people are then prepared to get into the deep dive of the facts. An example, the late Harry Bibring. When he is a kinder transportee, when he talks to kids about when he moved school, they didn't even give him a place to sit. That is soft factual information, but I would argue it's a moral truth that is so much more important than the literal facts of Kristallnacht, Kindertransport, etc., because it's something that will stick in kids' minds. And here's another example. This is the wonderful Agnes Kaposi, Hungarian survivor, who, I have to say, we crowdsourced the questions for the Forever Project based on 30 years worth of being with our survivors. And she was once asked, were there any toys in the camps? So knowing that that's the kind of question that can get asked, listen to what Agnes' answer was.
Yeah, I had plenty of toys. I had a great pitchfork, for example, to dig up the field. And I had a sickle to help with the harvest. I had a wooden hammer to beat up the ground, which made my hands bleed. They were my toys. I played with them from before the sun came up until the sun went down. Every day, they were my toys.
I love her spikiness. Again, it reminds you a survivor is a human being and is entitled to get irritated. And what a forceful way of making the point about the rigors of a camp, rather than just saying it was awful. 3 minutes left. I said that it's about the place as well, in which we encourage these relationships. This is what again, Agnes has to say about the place and the importance of it as part of the testimony.
It's important because it's a place of education, it's a place of commemoration, but most of all, because it's a manifestation of noble human spirit. I can't express with sufficient words my admiration for the Smith family, all 4 members of the Smith family, Marina and Eddie, and Stephen and James. They are fantastic people. And the museum and the Holocaust Center is a representation, physical representation of their spirit, their magnanimity. They are amazing people.
So, we're all fond of talking about upstanders. Talking about the Smiths openly, being asked questions about them, is a great way of demonstrating an example of upstanding in a small way today. So I could swear, I can't prove it, but could swear blind that in a way that's one of the most important things that kids go away from our place from. They've met the survivor, but it's the relationship between them and us that they kind of think, I could do something like that too. I'll skip a few things. I was just going to talk about the various stages we've gone through, but maybe I should skip that. I can answer questions afterwards about the technology, but suffice to say, it's now been going 7 years now. We're on its 3rd iteration. I should probably say that unlike our US cousins at the Shoah Foundation, we are more guarded in not being so comfortable with using it as what I call a walk-up experience. We think that the ethics are too delicate, especially with deepfakes and all the whatnots of that. So the sense of it being part of a structured learning program where we do insist that the kids have some kind of pre-learning so they're not coming to it cold. This is not an arcade experience. This is trying to replicate the relationships I showed you just before, and retaining a sense of respect for that digital version as if it was the real flesh and blood. And that's time up. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much.
Apologies for quite how brutal that was. I said I'd be ruthless. I didn't mean to be that brutal. Angela, we'd love to hear from you. Can I draw everyone's attention while Angela comes to the lectern of the QR code on the back of your programme and your handbook, so you can use that to find full biographies of all the speakers today, and if you want to reference speakers yesterday. Angela, over to you. Thank you.
So, good morning, everybody. So I'm from Scotland, in case you haven't recognised the accent, and I'm here to talk about the Gathering the Voices Association and our project. So there are 6 of us, 3 couples, and this is a digital comic representation of us. Later on, you can decide which one I am. The only thing I would say is my husband's very upset. He shrunk at the right-hand side. So the 3 men are all second generation, and we commenced in 2009. We are all volunteers with the Association of Jewish Refugees in Scotland, and so we used to kind of meet up with people and have afternoon teas, whatever. And in conversation along the way, we kind of found that quite a lot of people had never been interviewed. And then later on, my late mother-in-law died. And one of the things she constantly said beforehand was, yes, I have been interviewed, but everybody always wanted to know what happened to me during the Holocaust. They never asked about what I did after. It's just like my life stopped then, and I am not a victim. I'm a person. I've contributed to society, and I want people to know what I've done. And then when we spoke to other people, they also said, yes, I'm the same, and that's why I've never agreed to give my interview. So we started interviewing people. And so this is the aims of our organisation, is to gather audio and video testimonies from Holocaust refugees about their experiences before and after they came to Scotland. We started off only doing audio interviews because quite a few of the refugees said they didn't want to appear in video because they felt they were older and that's not what they wanted to be portrayed. So we interviewed people in their houses, in their places, so that people would feel comfortable. We were given digital recorders free from the university because we're chucking them out. And we planned our interviews to go through different stages. And it became sadly a bit of competition because people would say, I believe you had cake. I have made you this. Is it very good? It's absolutely fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. But we also said that all of our interviews, we told them from the beginning, they would go up on a website. They gave permission for them to be used for educational use. We said that nobody would ever pay to access any of our materials and that they would see the interviews before they went up. So the interviews went back to the interviewee, and we also had a written transcript as well. And they could decide what they wanted and whether they still wanted it to go up. And in fact, one lady I have interviewed up in Dundee, non-Jewish, daughter of a resistance fighter from Poland, amazing story, she escaped from the camp. She and her mother walked out with a guard, pretending that they were part of his family. Don't know how they managed it. But she won't agree for her interview to go up because she's worried about any effect it might have on relatives living in Poland. And we respect that, so it hasn't gone up. All of our interviews were digitally recorded by a professional recording studio. And the problem is that obviously people changed their minds. So one of them, Bob Cutner, decided he wanted a section changed. And the recording studio, which is one of the top recording studios in Scotland, said, well, come to the recording studio and we'll change it there. And the others then heard and said, I believe that when you go to the recording studio, if you're a woman, you get a bunch of flowers. And if you're a man, you get a bottle of wine. I want to be re-interviewed at the recording studio. So we went back to the recording studio. And so some people have been interviewed 3 times. So everything is available online. And we are also educating current and future generations about the dangers of racism and intolerance. And we also collaborate. That's a huge part. Can I just remind you, we are 3 couples. I am the youngest. I'm one of the few not wearing a hearing aid. That's all I'm saying. And also, we are a charity, so we are totally dependent on kind of voluntary aspects from people giving us our services at very much reduced price. So this is a little video.
I must say I have been extremely lucky. People have been enormously friendly. Even when we were on war work and things were rationed, people would invite us to share their meals in their houses. When food and everything was very, very short, there was never any word of being the enemy, and people were extremely thoughtful and very pleasant.
In June of 1940, everybody who registered to return home to Poland was taken to a big cattle truck train, and we were all transported to Siberia. Thousands and thousands of families, thousands. Big, big trains, cattle trucks packed full of people. It was quite an experience. I mean, we must have been on that train about, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. I was 8 years old. I don't really know exactly.
For your own children and your grandchildren now, some growing up in France, some growing up here, what do you want for them?
Well, I just want them to be happy. I think that it gives me great joy to find that I have, in fact, 5 grandsons, and I sort of feel every time something like that happens, I say one in the eye for Hitler, you know?
So that was my late mother-in-law, and she actually had 6 grandsons. And that was my husband with his sister and her 3 sons. He didn't even want to be photographed with me. That's all I'm saying. So this is, I'm going to whiz through quite a lot of slides to give you an idea of how our website looks. So this is a home page of the testimonies, and at the front page you can click on to testimonies and it leads you to this, and you get a short extract to give you an idea what the testimonies are about. Because I love it when young people say, so I want to actually find out about someone's from Vieira. Which one shall I look at? And I think, go and press the button. We have divided them into stages. So we have before the war, during the war, after the war, and we also have a section on reflection as well. And not everybody's life story works out with that as well. I have to also say, we never interviewed my late mother-in-law. We discovered cassette tapes in a cupboard after she died, and the recording studio, the lovely Duncan, re-edited it, and that's why we have it on our website. And the Pat Anson one, we also didn't interview either. He also did a huge amount of work. So we're very lucky with the support that we get. So we have over 50 interviews, oral and transcribed interviews, so that they're accessible. We have a YouTube channel, because we have now got videos as well, because, again, some of them said, I hear there's videos. I kind of quite fancy appearing on a video. Right, okay, we'll do videos. Right, okay. And again, we were very lucky. Somebody did the videos for us free, and he's a professional video recorder. Extremely lucky. We also have a podcast channel as well, and we have a lot of teaching resources. And so
with passports, with tickets.
This is just a little bit from the podcast channel.
Most of our friends smuggled out
I
of
got
Poland.
a job in Porton Cross.
But this Scottish tweet ran through my life.
Used to be alive.
I went to school, went to Scholland's Academy for 4 months.
That's how I got your passport.
I was sent to school right away. I went to Queen's Park School.
And then suddenly, people told me I was a refugee.
Do you still think of yourself as a refugee?
Yes. I do.
Sorry, I forgot I pressed it twice that would bring up the audio. So that, we have a little introduction to the podcast, and so that's a little extract from the podcast trailer. We do believe in collaboration. As it was explained, I'm still attached to Glasgow Caledonian University, and so I worked in the School of Engineering, Computing and Built Environment, and so I've collaborated with a lot of students and staff in that department. So we also have collaborated with teachers as well. We have a huge amount of resources which all fit the curriculum of Scotland. And so people can just pop in and get total lesson plans with videos and all sorts of material attached to it, all available on our website. And so that's just showing the kind of entry page to go into it. We also have a mobile exhibition, and I'll kind of come up with some figures beforehand. And again, we asked students to come up with ideas for the mobile exhibition. All of them were absolutely dreadful. It was great fun. With my favourite one being, it was a group of, well, first of all, you have to understand that students don't get on. So my favourite ones were the groups where the students weren't speaking. So they gave their presentations all divided up the room, which was good. Was the one who said, what we've done is we're going to put it up on a screen and that you pedal a bike, and the bike will get the video going, and that's how you can view your exhibition. Right, okay, we didn't take it. We didn't take any of their ideas. I did say to one group, I think your representation looks like coffins, and they went, no, it's sentry boxes. Oh, right, okay, that's very good. And another one had reusable wood, which was on a three-dimensional, which sat on the floor, which I thought was amazing. And I said, so what happens if water goes on it? And they said, oh, it dissolves. So we didn't do that either. So we have a fantastic mobile exhibition, which has been everywhere. It was done professionally, again, by the wonderful Donald Gillanders. And Stephen Anson said, do you have much experience in doing this kind of thing? And he said, I did the exhibition for the Queen's Jubilee. And we went, all right, could you give us a reduction? Because we don't actually have that much money. So Donald did this wonderful exhibition, and wonderfully, a lot of our interviewees were still alive and they came and viewed it. Professor John Subert Sharp said, "You spelt Siebert Medal incorrectly. I want that panel changed." "Right, not a problem." Trotted back to Donald and said, "If you come out for lunch with us, would you mind changing it?" So yes, we got it changed. Right, these are some of the statistics for our mobile exhibition. It's been around before COVID, 155 locations, 17,200 school pupils. We've had about 203 events. So we have been everywhere, the Parliament, Kelvin Grove, up north. And this is just to show our YouTube channel. We've kind of done a new thing where we have 7 extracts from Martin Anson's story, tied up with historical context for students and pupils to use. These are some of our website figures. We redid our website, and just to show you that from 2021 to 2022, we had 21,000 visitors visit our website, which I think is not bad for a small group of 6 elderly people. And the biggest difference for us for attracting interest is the Twitter account. So I do the tweets, the others don't understand how to do them. We've also appeared on television programs last year. We were on a series which was Inside Central Station. So I'm on it interviewing Marion Camras, and Claire's on interviewing Henry Wooga, which was great, but we didn't know we were doing the interviewing until we turned up. So you can access our website directly, and I've also got lots of leaflets, which I'd be very grateful if you took a leaflet to save me taking them home. We're archived, as I said yesterday, in the British Library. We're also archived in the National Library of Scotland. And Glasgow Caledonian University have been fantastic. They have archived all of our audio testimonies, and they have then, through that way, they're now available on Scopus and also EdShare. So I noticed that University of Southampton is kind of linked onto that. So it's a different way for those who are doing from universities, a different way of accessing. And also Scopus and Google Scholar. And also we are the first community group to have ever been put into the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure Portal. Quite a mouthful, but I think a great achievement. And also Hidden Treasures has got us on their archive as well. We are involved in new projects. You can see our digital comic, which is on the website. And also we have done 10 lesson plans on kinder transport with Poppy Scotland. And we are also now doing a Holocaust timeline. Again, you access it from the front page. There's a bit of history. You click at the bottom and you go straight into someone's interview. And this is Marion's Journey, which is final thing, which is a serious computer game, which is coming out later this year, which has been partially financed by AGR. So it's a little extract. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angela. It feels so brutal when people have so much to say about fascinating projects. But delighted to hand over now to Alessandro.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Alessandro Bucci. I'm the director of the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association in Huddersfield. And I'm going to take this in a slightly different trajectory because I want to talk about something that happened to us during the digital age, particularly in the latest reiteration brought by COVID. And like, I guess, for many of you, this was a period of loss. This was a period of organizational and personal loss, as we lost many of our survivors, but we also lost this lady that some of you might have met, Lillian Black, OBE. And Lillian was really the engine behind our organization, particularly in the phase when it transformed into a heritage organization. So yes, it was a difficult period, lots of things to navigate, but looking back, I can see how the fact that our transformation into Holocaust Center North happened during the pandemic as really, yes, it would have been very different if it didn't happen before the pandemic. And I think the logics of the digital, the things that make the digital, really impacted the rebrand and the Holocaust Center North that we are now. And I'm not talking about the digital per se, I just want to stress that. I'm not talking about how we use technology or how we've done digital events or how we use TikTok these days to reach younger people. But I'm talking about the key elements that the digital made us think about. So for example, I'm talking about how we rediscovered connections, a sense of place, a sense of community. And for us, this meant working more closely than ever with the community of survivors that founded the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association. I'm also thinking about the way in which, by working online, we were able to identify some of the limits of the digital world. I realized at one point that we were sending more letters than ever to communicate with people rather than sending emails. And I'm also talking about the conflation of our borders, which really enabled us to test ideas far and gather constituencies around us that we simply did not know would be interested in our work before the pandemic, and even find supporters. I don't think that this rebrand would have been the same if we'd done it in a different time. So, long story short, for those that don't know us, I'm going to start this in a minute. The Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association starts, we think, in 1995, in the most informal of ways, in the offices of the Leeds Jewish Welfare Board, when, yes, people there were talking about something that was on the news. And what was on the news was news of incredible and obscene genocide in Bosnia. What became obvious in that moment was that 3 people in that room were familiar with genocide. They were indeed Holocaust survivors. So there and then, they realized that there was a space for a group of support for survivors of the Holocaust in Leeds to discuss, to open up about what happened to themselves and their families during the Holocaust. And what was even more extraordinary was that each of them knew other people with similar histories in Leeds and West Yorkshire. So there and then, the foundations of a support group were formed. I'm going to shorten this story, and I'm going to say that their ambition grew very quickly. They started to go into schools and give talks, and very soon somebody thought that the best way to tell their story would be through a traveling exhibition. The ambition grew even more, and somebody, Lillian Black, thought, why not make it permanent? And we now are a permanent exhibition facility on the campus of the University of Huddersfield. We rebranded during the pandemic. We're now Holocaust Center North. We had a deep look at what we were doing, and we identified 5 areas through which we do our work. So most of these areas were born actually during the pandemic. And really, it all started because we looked at our surrounding. We are in a very interdisciplinary campus. So yes, we tell a global and intergenerational history of the Holocaust through the stories of survivors and refugees who build new lives in the north of England. And the aim is to raise awareness of human rights. We have a permanent exhibition and learning center, a growing collection and living archive, public engagement and learning, research, partnerships, and artistic collaborations, and community support and friendship. And I want to stress that the specificity of our coinage, of how we exist, emerging as we did as a community-led welfare organization, to then become a community-led heritage organization only 5 years ago, is itself a testimony and tribute to the survivors who spontaneously came together, self-organized to create Holocaust Center North, contributing their stories and their family papers and collections to the wealth of work that had already been done in the UK, but also continuing to work hard to educate the next generations on the Holocaust in one of the most challenging areas of the United Kingdom. But at the same time, our work also contributes actively to extend the debate on the ethical and aesthetical concerns about representation and its limits by producing work that insists on presence as well as absence, empathy, and a responsible culture of care when we work with testimony, impermanence, participation, and an emphasis on context, and often, not always, but often, challenging traditional conceptions on how we learn about the Holocaust and post-Holocaust history. These are just some of the questions that we always keep in our mind when creating our programs. And I just want to walk you through some of our projects. And in each of these projects, these questions are always a consideration and a concern. So first of all, I want to tell you about our collection of testimony and other collections as well. My team and I inherited the responsibility for Holocaust Center North collections and soon realized that they were a very mixed collection, mixed museum and archive collections. Yahad developed ad hoc, the development was organic, and it was mostly coming out of two history projects. They were seen very much as very separate things associated to self-contained projects. Thanks to support from the AJR and the lottery, we were able to start collecting testimony and collections more strategically when we were opening our permanent exhibition facility. During the pandemic, we employed our first qualified archivist, and we're now just about to employ an archive assistant. We had to redefine the organization legally from a legal point of view as a repository of archive and museum collections so that we could achieve the legal permanence that collections need in the longer term. In other words, with the transition in Holocaust Center North, we're now witnessing the birth of an archive. And since last January, I'm delighted to say, with the support of the Claims Conference and the National Archives, among others, we have now started cataloging our collections. Cataloging the collections is like creating a map of a collection so that people can look for its content by themselves. And we will soon be digitizing it for remote access. As well as testimonies, we have other collections. We have family papers, including photographs, personal treasures, household objects, travel documents, naturalization papers, ephemera, artwork, and many, many letters and postcards. It is the place where we store E.B. Neill's testimony of being on a death march, as well as intergenerational interviews done more recently with her family. This is something that we do quite actively, meeting different generations at the same time, going back to the first generation. It is the place where our Theresienstadt postcards are stored, resisting censorship and giving us an insight into life in the ghetto. It is the place which shows material traces of intergenerational memory and trauma, such as this letter written by John Shilag to his son, and it's a letter written in 1991 in which John tries to tell Lawrence that he is a Holocaust survivor for the first time, and actually in the letter doesn't quite manage to do that. It is also the place where some of our second generation members are beginning to donate some of their collections. For example, the family papers of Lily Pollock, also in the double exposure exhibition. And it is also the place where you can find some institutional history and collective testimony, such as the collection of the Bradford Refugee Hostel, a mixture of home objects, home videos, documents, including the original foundation document, which gives an insight on the need for the refugee hostel by the refugee community. And in addition to this example, you can also find the family papers of over 100 families and 120 testimonies of survivors who all share the fact that they made the north of England their home following persecution. It's a very specific story. It's a story of underrepresented communities, those who identify both as Jewish and Northern. In this, our nascent archive inspired our current mission to tell a global history through local stories from the north of England. And this includes places like Leeds, Huddersfield, Sheffield, York, Hull, Manchester, Newcastle. And we're looking to represent Liverpool, Merseyside, Cumbria, and the Northeast. So yes, I thought this would be a good introduction, and to say that the history of our collection, bringing it to the present, the history of its growth, highlights the paradoxical moment in which Holocaust Center North finds itself, We are in this paradoxical moment in which our community is both shrinking, but it is also enlarging, because since the rebrand, many people have been approaching us saying, we're also in the north, we're also northern, interview us. So we're quite busy. More from the Bradford Refugee Hostel. I want to talk briefly about our learning program, just mindful of time as well, which is also supported by the AJR. It was one of the first things that opened with the exhibition, but we recently relaunched it to again put at the heart the northern stories that are represented in our archive. We worked with some of you to develop it and test it, so I feel this is the area that needs the least introduction. We used a recorded testimony, we also used live testimony, and something that we've added is also that we teach, because one of our main drives is to teach a culture of care, we also teach children to look after the original materials. To look after the original materials. And because you never know, the next archivist could be in that group. Okay, I'm going to use the last 3 minutes to speak about the last part of the last program that I wanted to mention today, which is called Memorial Gestures. And this is a program of art residencies for contemporary artists, and in the future also writers and translators. The issue of translator is quite important because we want testimony to reach as many as possible. And yes, think about the statistics. 1 in 10 Urdu speakers in the UK lives in West Yorkshire. So we are thinking that the Translator in Residence program will be an opportunity to reach new audiences through community language. So yeah, it's a program of Arctic residencies. We're able to fund opportunities for young people that desperately want to engage with our collection to come in and use their expertise, their art practice to create something new. And the numbers have been astonishing. I just want to use the time left to read one email that we received from somebody that at the end we couldn't accommodate. We received many emails like this, but this is an email I will never forget. Thank you for answering. Unfortunately, yes, I'm currently based in Russia right now, trying to evacuate from there because of war mobilization. This is a hard thing to do, but I'm with my friends, also artists, and we're heading to Kazakhstan, hoping we'll be lucky there to get through border control. I really want to work with your material, and no worries, this is the 3rd time this year I'm trying to leave Russia in a hurry. Sometimes, somehow, I get used to it. All the best. We didn't hear from this person in the end, despite trying. But I want to say this is a generation of artists who came after, a generation that knows the Holocaust mostly through its representations. Some of them are descendants of survivors, like Rachel Mars or Daria Martin, whose exhibition is now on show at Holocaust Center North. And others are incredibly talented people who understand, like all of us, the importance of being responsible for how stories and testimonies are used, and how important it is that they continue to resonate in the present and into the future. American art historian and historian of Judaism, James Young, who has discussed at length the fundamental role of the contemporary art can play in rethinking memory in the contemporary moment, has produced a framework for thinking about this kind of work as after images, a notion that is deeply indebted to psychoanalysis and its theorization of trauma. Young believed that these belated encounters with memory may provide paradigms for disciplinary practice of history in the future. In the concluding words of his introduction to A Memory at Edge, he writes, "It is time to step back and take an accounting. Where does all this history and its telling lead? To what kinds of knowledge, to what ends? For this, I believe, is the primary challenge to Holocaust historiography. It is history telling and memory that not only mark their own coming into being, but also point to the places where they may inevitably take us." It might be said that this program, Memorial Gestures, enacts and explores the possibilities and limits of language. Nowhere are the incapacities of language more acute than in the aftermath of trauma. As one of our participants, a member of the 2nd generation, recently said after working with us, "Artistic methodologies help me confront the loss when answers became unavailable. the intergenerational trauma and the impact on present times. And in creating their work, in insisting upon the gap between experience and its enunciation, between history and its representation, between the self and the other, these contemporary artists are producing memorial gestures. Episodes that allow for the possibility of remembering, the possibility of discourse, of communication, and with that, the transmission of experience, the experience of other. In other words, of history. I have some images of the artworks that have been produced, so if you'd like to see them, come find me. And these were just a selection. If you can't see me, I will have a lot more as well. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. I'd like to now hand over to Michal.
I feel the pressure now, the time. So just 2 remarks before starting my presentation. At first, I wanted to express my gratitude to the Association of Jewish Refugees for the invitation and to have gathered scholars, practitioners, representatives of institutions, archivists, museums, NGOs. It's not every day that we have the opportunity to hear from experts of collecting and disseminating Holocaust testimonies. So I just felt important to underline it. And second, I was born in Poland and I grew up in France. So I hope that due to my origin and my linguistic background, you will be able at least to understand partially my presentation in English. So as mentioned, I'm working for Yahad in UNUM since 2011 as a director of the research center since 2020. So the Yahad in UNUM is an organization that was founded by the French Catholic priest Father Patrick Desbois, and the organization is dedicated to systematically documenting the mass executions of Jews and Roma perpetrated by Nazis and their collaborators in Central and Eastern Europe during the Second World War, and also to identify the execution sites of the victims. So historians estimated recently that more than 2 million of Jews were murdered in mass executions east of the death camps, mostly in Nazi-occupied Soviet Union between 41 and 44 during the so-called Holocaust by bullets. So after an in-depth research within Soviet, German, Polish archives and other documents, we travel from village to village to seek out local witnesses of Nazi atrocities. We film interviews, document the events, and locate the mass graves of Jewish and Roma victims. So the Yahad in UNUM archives is the largest collection of video-recorded testimonies with non-Jewish neighbors of the Holocaust. We're talking about nearly 8,000 interviews today with the observers, the bystanders, or whatever we are calling them right now. And so unlike colleagues who are involved in collecting testimonies of Jewish survivors, this intervention will focus on the testimonies of the neighbors of the Holocaust, and will be also an opportunity to reflect on the use of this testimony for educational purposes in a digital era, and on the pedagogical resources we created recently, including a map of killing sites of Jews that were murdered in Eastern occupied territories during the Holocaust. So basically, this is the places where we investigated, and in the last years, the investigation is still ongoing. The only difference is because between the red dot and the blue dots is the fact that the red dots are clickable and are already accessible online. So each dot refers to a Jewish community that was murdered during the during the Holocaust. So our work is based on the premise that the mass killings of Jews perpetrated by the Nazis were not made in secret. Instead, the crimes were very often conducted in public, in broad light, as it was mentioned yesterday several times, on the border of villages, along roads, in Jewish cemeteries, in fields, or even in the centers of town and villages under the watch of non-Jewish inhabitants of these villages and towns. And local inhabitants that you can still find today in those villages were always almost aware of what happened to their Jewish neighbors, and what is more, they often saw how and where these victims were murdered. So now it will be next year 20 years of research. We uncovered the locations of more than 3,000 of killing sites of the Holocaust through interviewing the witnesses of their disappearance. So we did this research in 11 countries, in Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Poland, Moldova, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Republic of Northern Macedonia, and Slovakia. And among countries where we conducted extensive research, it's necessary to mention Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, Poland, Moldova, Romania, and Lithuania. And as I mentioned, the research is ongoing. This year we have 6 research trips that are scheduled in Central and Eastern Europe. I will skip some of the part of my presentations because I think it's more important to give you a few information about the profile of the people that we are interviewing. For the large majority, they were born between 1920 and 1934. And if my research is correct, the oldest person that we interviewed was 107 years old when we interviewed her in 2016 in Ostrołęka in Poland. So what was very surprising that this lady that was born in 1909 was supposed to talk to us about the Second World War, but she also had memories of the First World War. So that was very interesting to hear, and she didn't let us leave her house before having a glass of vodka with her. So this is the just one. we're working. So I prefer to shorten my presentation and to give you the opportunity to watch one of the excerpts of the testimony, because I think it's also important to see some of them in such a conference. So this is a testimony that was recorded in the village of Borivka in the Vinica region in Ukraine in 2018.
9 числа, 10-го по селу пішов, поговорив, буде акція на євреїв. Ну, 11 серпня, 11 августа, зранку, з мого двору, якщо я виходжу на погреб, і погреб там висота, і віжу село, за селом наші 2 довгі будинки лікарні. Туди всіх євреїв, поліцаї зігнали всіх євреїв. Я побіг на другу вулицю, там жив мій двоюродний брат і його друг. Вони на 1 рік старші мене. Ми побігли подивитись, що таке. Но туди побігти не можна, там поліцаї. Ми побігли на кладбище, на кладовище. Заховались між могилками, і там кущі, дерева, кущі. Ми заховались, в 150 метрах від лікарні. І нам все видно, що робиться. За лікарнею метрах 100, ну, я не знаю, 100-150, великий рів є. То туди, коли працював цукровий завод, відходи всякі зливалися. І метрах 50, може 50, перед тим ровом стоїть стіл, довгий стіл. На столі 2 станка, в станках автомати німецькі. Заховались в кущах там, може 200 метрів, 150, але ми обличчя бачили, розлічали обличчя. І бачу, сидять, підходять 2 в сірій німецькій формі, але без знаків розлічення. В 2 формі, автомати, флажок, а поліцаї піднімає флажок червоно-чорний прапор. Я зараз, як побачу той прапор, бачу ці всі, махнув, поліцаї виводять групу людей, євреїв. Жінки, там 5, 6, 8 чоловік виводять з дітьми на руках, виводять, поставили на борту, і ці 2 з автомату сидять на стульчиках і так, як кіно, показують. Розстріляли ті люди, попадали, хто там. Знову прапорцем, червоно-чорним прапорцем. Махнув. Виводять нову групу, там 4. Виводять, дивлюсь, мої соученики Сара Шихман, Женя Міштикман, дівчатки, Ріва Косянська. Всі ми бачимо своїх, і що ми можемо зробити? Нам по 15 років. Що ми там можемо проти поліцаїв з оружієм, ті все.
So, I wanted to show you these testimonies because in the case of the Holocaust in Eastern Territories, there were very few survivors of these mass executions. And in that case, we deeply believe that the testimonies of the local population are also key tools and resources to preserve the memories of those communities that disappears. And as you can see, some testimonies could be very intimate, right? People here are talking about close acquaintances, about classmates, for instance. So the witnesses that we are interviewing, they became witnesses for different reasons. Some were forced to perform some task in the frame of the genocide, to dig the pits before the execution, to cover the bodies, to transport the victims. There were those who were neighbors, and I speak in terms of geographic proximity because the executions happened in their field, in their yard. There were those who were forced to watch. This happened mainly in territories where there was important movements of resistance, like in Belarus, when there was organized killing of Jews. The whole population was taken to watch the execution as a treat. There were those who were simply curious, especially the children. We heard it thousands of times. You know, we were children, so we went to see what was going on because something was happening in the village. And there are also those who were accidental witnesses, those who went for grazing the cattle, for instance, and that witnessed the executions. Of course, this classification doesn't not reflect our understanding of the status of these witnesses, some of whom belong to the gray area of the genocide, which is a really hot topic among researchers now, especially in Poland. We are also working on that. It's more an attempt to categorize the reasons given by interviewees to explain their presence on the crime scenes. So the interviews are about many different periods of time, pre-war, the war, the post-war period. So the specificity of our collection is the fact that at the end of each interview, when it's possible, we bring the witnesses to the places described during the interviews. The places related to the Jewish traditions, but of course also places that are related to the Holocaust and especially the killing sites. And this is important because most of the sites remains forgotten today. There are, like, based on our statistics, like there are 51% of the killing sites that remains unprotected and unmemorialized at the date when we visited that. Then it means that there were also initiatives that were done to commemorate it. This panel is about transmission, and I will finish on that, is about transmission. So we use this testimony in the frame of our educational initiatives. Those testimonies are accessible online through our interactive map. Here on the interactive map is interesting because you can access to those testimonies and you have selected excerpts with English subtitles that are usable. In the classrooms, for instance, and we are also working on a platform right now the entire testimonies are also available on request. On the interactive map, there is a form to fill, and you will get access online to it. And if you would like to have, as I have to finish, there is the map is connected with the study guide, which is connected with an exhibition also that you can visit. So if you would like to have more information online about that. And I will just finish with that. For us, the main questions in transmitting this history of the Holocaust in Eastern Europe is how to integrate it in curriculum, in lessons plans that are dealing with Holocaust in general, because in many countries, this part of the history is still absent. And the other remark that I would like to say, we also think it's important to work in these testimonies, especially in the countries where these testimonies were recorded, because we know that there are attempts in some of the countries of rewriting the histories, and they are mostly based on the fact that the history was for many years in this country based on the perspective of Germans, of Nazis, but also on the Jewish perspective. And so the local perspective was kind of absent. And so we think that these testimonies have an important role to play nowadays to be able to transmit the local history. So thank you very much for your attention.
Friends, I want to conclude this section by highlighting some thoughts from our speakers to take us into the break. Marc encouraged us to think about going beyond conventional testimony. So perhaps we can think about what that might mean. Angela followed that up by talking about not only the testimony of the Holocaust experience, but also survivors' reflections much later. Alessandro encouraged us to think about the limits of a digital world for testimony. And Michal was encouraging us at the end to think about how we integrate testimonies with curriculums. Of course, there is so much more that they have all raised, and I hope we'll consider these as we move into our break. Apologies we've not managed to make up the time, but thank you all for sharing this session with us. Please ask questions during the break. Thank you to FCDO for hosting us and to the tech people for making it work so smoothly. Thank you, Bear.